In the heart of Nairobi, a city that dances to the chaotic, vibrant rhythm of a million dreams, there are two truths. There is the truth of the gleaming towers piercing the African sky, of bustling markets overflowing with color and life, a city of endless, kinetic promise where a new millionaire is minted every day. And then, there is the other truth, the one whispered in the long shadows cast by those same towers, the story of voices stolen in the dead of night. Our story lives in the treacherous space between both, for in Kenya, we know that a single bracelet does not jingle. It takes many to make a sound. This was a time when silence had become a currency, one the government paid for with fear. It was a creeping, insidious quiet, settling over the city like the red dust of the harmattan. Journalists who dug too deep, activists who spoke too loud, ordinary citizens who dared to simmer aquilai, speak the truth, would simply vanish. They became ghosts in their own city, their faces fading from memory until they were just another name on a whispered list, another empty chair at a family dinner table. But even the deepest, most suffocating silence can be shattered by a single, defiant voice. That voice belonged to Wanjiru. She was not born a leader, not one of the scions of political dynasties who inherited power like a family heirloom. She was forged in the crucible of the times, her resolve hardened by the grief of a nation. With a mind as sharp and pragmatic as a farmer's ponga and a heart that beat in sync with the city's restless youth, she began to gather the threads of discontent. Her followers were the children of the internet age, the generation that had grown up with the world in their pockets. They were armed not with guns or stones, but with hashtags, encrypted messaging apps, and smartphones that could turn any citizen into a broadcaster. They called their movement Sauti ya Haki, the voice of justice. Wanjiru was the strategist, the focal point. Her right hand was Kendi, a meticulous planner whose mind was a map of Nairobi's chaotic arteries. Kendi could orchestrate a flash mob protest, coordinating dozens of small groups to converge, chant, and disperse through the labyrinthine backalleys of the CBD with the precision of a master weaver working a complex loom. Her left hand was Omondi, a poet whose soul was pure fire. His words, launched into the digital ether from his battered laptop, were verbal grenades. A single tweet from Omondi could rally thousands, his verses capturing the raw anger and soaring hope of their cause long before the government's lumbering propaganda machine could even type a response. But their guardian angel, their invisible shield, was a ghost of a different kind. An entity known only by the cryptic handle Nyoka. The snake. Nyoka was a digital phantom, a legend whispered about in hacker forums from Nairobi to Lagos. He moved through the government's state-of-the-art firewalls like a whisper of wind through dry grass. His interventions were surgical, almost magical. Police servers would crash moments before a planned raid on a Sauti ya Haki safe house. A heavily censored government report on extrajudicial killings would suddenly appear, unredacted, on an international news site. When the state-run media blocked their hashtags, Nyoka would find a backdoor, a digital wormhole, and Sauti ya Haki's message would always find its way to the light. Wanjiru had never met him, had never even heard his voice, but she felt a strange, profound connection to this invisible protector. He was their unseen brother in arms, their shield in the encroaching digital darkness. The movement grew, a groundswell becoming a tidal wave. The hashtag where they became a global trending topic, a digital monument to the disappeared, each tweet a flower laid on a virtual grave. Sauti ya Haki's protests were brilliant in their execution, small, sharp, and impossible to contain. 100 students with banners would materialize on Moore Avenue, their chants echoing off the glass facades for 5 minutes before melting back into the lunchtime crowds. A line of empty shoes would appear overnight outside State House, each pair representing a stolen voice. The government, personified by the cold, calculating Minister of Internal Security, David Mwangi, was growing incandescent with fury. He was a man who understood brute force, not digital insurgency. It was like trying to punch smoke. One humid evening, after a particularly close call where Nyoka's timely warning had saved Kendi and Omondi from an impending arrest, Wanjiru decided it was time. The anonymity was a strength, but it was also a vulnerability. She needed to look their guardian in the eye. She sent a carefully encrypted message into the void, the hunter must know the shape of his spear. The reply came hours later, a single line of unencrypted text that made her heart hammer against her ribs. It was a risk, a test. City Market. Stall 12. Ask for Juma's Mutura. The air at the market was a thick, intoxicating soup of charcoal smoke, roasting maize, and the spicy, gamey aroma of mutura sizzling over hot coals. The cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, the blare of a distant matatu's horn, the chatter of a dozen languages, it was the city's raw, unfiltered heartbeat. Wanjiru, cloaked in a simple hoodie, felt a dozen eyes on her as she navigated the throng. She was looking for a hardened cypherpunk, the paranoid recluse with eyes that darted nervously. She expected someone who looked like he lived in a basement, illuminated only by the glow of a monitor. Stall 12 was a small, unassuming setup, a man with a broad back expertly turning sausages over a drum grill. As he turned to greet a customer, Wanjiru saw him. He was not what she expected. He was young, perhaps her own age, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a laugh that seemed entirely out of place in their dangerous, clandestine world. This was Juma. "You're Juma?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, the question hanging in the smoky air. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, he seemed to see right through her carefully constructed persona as a fearless leader, to the uncertainty beneath. He wiped his greasy hands on a cloth and offered a small, weary smile. "Even a snake has to eat." The tension in her shoulders eased, replaced by a disarming sense of disbelief. They talked for over an hour, sharing a plate of sizzling shikaki under the dim, flickering yellow light of a single bulb. He spoke of growing up in Mathar, of teaching himself to code on a discarded library computer, of the rage he felt when his childhood friend became one of the first names on the hashtag where they list. She spoke of the suffocating weight of hope, of the faces of the mothers who came to her, clutching faded photographs of their missing sons and daughters. In that small, greasy space, surrounded by the chaos of the city, the frontline leader and the digital warrior found a quiet, shared ground. A spark ignited between them that night, a connection more potent and far more dangerous than any encrypted signal. In their world, love was not a comfort, it was a liability. Minister Mwangi, frustrated by his inability to catch the digital phantom Nayoka, decided to strike at the heart of the movement. He wouldn't use a midnight raid or a public arrest, his methods were far more insidious and more cruel. One afternoon, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up outside the modest apartment block where Wanjiru's mother lived. Mwangi, dressed in a sharp suit, took the lift to the 4th floor. He didn't threaten. He was charm personified. He accepted a cup of tea, commented on the sweetness of the sugar, and admired a framed photo of Wanjiru as a little girl on the mantelpiece. She was always a strong-willed child, her mother said, her voice laced with a pride that couldn't quite mask her fear. Mwangi smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "Strength is a wonderful quality, Mama Wanjiru. A fire that can warm a house. But you must be careful it does not burn the house down." He placed his teacup gently on the saucer. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the quiet room. The message was delivered, unspoken but crystal clear: a daughter's crusade could cost a mother everything. Wanjiru was shaken to her core. The abstract weight of leadership suddenly became a physical, crushing burden. The faces of the disappeared were now joined by the terrified face of her own mother. That night, she sought refuge on a hidden rooftop overlooking the glittering expanse of the city, the distant pulse of its nightlife a low, mournful hum. The weight was too much. She felt herself beginning to crumble. She didn't hear him approach until he was standing beside her. "Juma." He didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. He simply stood with her, sharing the silence. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice soft, quoting an old proverb. "Simba mnyuramo habaiwi," he said. "A roaring lion kills no game." She turned to him, tears tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "I'm so tired of roaring, Juma." "I know," he said, his gaze fixed on the city below. "Your fire is what keeps us all warm, Wanjiru. It's what gives us hope. But you don't have to burn alone." In the cool night air, surrounded by the sleeping, vulnerable city, their defenses finally crumbled. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face, and he kissed her. It was a kiss born of shared passion and mutual desperation, the fragile promise to protect each other in a world that seemed determined to tear them, and everything they fought for, apart. The government's response wasn't always so chillingly menacing. Sometimes, it was just clumsy. Minister Mwangi, in a rare and ill-advised attempt to embrace modern technology, procured a state-of-the-art surveillance drone. He assigned one officer, Kamau, a man far more comfortable with a wooden button than a sophisticated joystick, to pilot the new toy. Kamau's mission was to spy on a rumored Sotia Haki gathering in Uhuru Park. The launch was less than spectacular. The drone lifted, wobbled precariously, shot sideways, flew upside down for a terrifying 10 seconds, and then found itself in the flight path of a flock of enormous, aggressive marabou storks. The prehistoric-looking birds, mistaking the whirring machine for a rival or a particularly strange-looking snack, attacked with vicious fury. The drone's camera captured a chaotic blur of feathers, beaks, and sky before it spiraled downwards, crashing directly into a vendor's cart, creating an explosion of perfectly ripe avocados. The footage, somehow leaked by Nayoka, went viral. Within an hour, the internet was flooded with memes of Kamau's kamikaze drone, set to the latest trending Afrobeats tracks. It was a small, hilarious victory, a moment of collective laughter in the face of pervasive fear. But it made them feel invincible. And that was a fatal mistake. Emboldened by their successes, both digital and avian, Sotia Haki planned their masterpiece, their magnum opus, the Great Reveal. It was to be a two-pronged attack. The first was a massive, peaceful march culminating on the steps of Parliament, where Wanjiru would deliver a speech that would be their generation's defining call to arms. Simultaneously, Juma, from his secret digital command center, would execute his most audacious hack yet. He would hijack the national broadcast network, replacing the state-sanctioned news with a dossier he had painstakingly compiled, a digital bomb of irrefutable proof. It contained names, dates, satellite photos of unmarked graves, and financial records, all leading back to one man, Minister Mwangi. The centerpiece was a scanned order for a special rendition, bearing Mwangi's own signature. The days leading up to the march were thick with a suffocating, electric suspense. The air in Nairobi crackled with it. Their final safe house, a small apartment in South Sea, was raided by the GSU, the dreaded General Service Unit, just minutes after they had evacuated. A tip-off from Juma, who had intercepted a fragment of police radio chatter, had saved their lives by a razor-thin margin. Another night, a planned meeting was aborted when they were forced into a desperate, breathless chase through the labyrinthine, mud-walled alleys of Kibera. A leak. There had to be a leak. The paranoia was a poison, seeping into the foundations of their trust. Suspicion, unspoken but palpable, fell on Omondi. His fiery passion, his strength, sometimes bordered on recklessness. He was a poet, not a soldier, and in his desire to inspire, had he been careless. Kendi's meticulous plans were being compromised. Wanjiru found herself caught between her two most trusted lieutenants, trying to hold together a bond that was beginning to fray under the immense pressure. The day of the march arrived, grey and overcast, as if the city itself was holding its breath. But the people came. First in trickles, then in streams, then in a flood. A river of humanity, tens of thousands strong, poured into the streets, flowing towards the single point of hope that was Parliament. Their signs were their shields, a hashtag "Where are they?" Sima Akulai. My silence will not protect me. Their songs were their weapons, old liberation anthems given new life by a new generation. Wanjiru, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, stepped up to the makeshift podium. A hush fell over the vast crowd. She looked out at the sea of faces, young, old, hopeful, defiant, and felt a surge of pure, unadulterated purpose. In his den, a cramped room filled with a spiderweb of cables and glowing screens, Juma initiated the final sequence. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The national broadcast signal, showing a dull parliamentary debate, began to flicker. 3, 2, 1, he whispered, his eyes fixed on the progress bar. Nothing. The progress bar froze, then vanished. The screen went black. A firewall he had never seen before slammed down, cutting him off completely. A trap. And then, on the streets, chaos erupted. From the side streets, the GSU swarmed in. They moved not like police controlling a crowd, but like wolves cutting a single wildebeest from the herd. They moved with terrifying, disciplined precision, their batons and shields held ready, ignoring the panicked masses on the periphery. They were cutting a direct path through the heart of the crowd, heading for one target. The leak hadn't just been a tip-off, it had been a map leading them directly to the Queen. Wanjiru saw them coming, a tide of dark green uniforms and riot helmets. In his den, Juma, now frantically switching between security camera feeds, saw it too. He saw the GSU closing in. And then he saw him. Standing by a black command vehicle, a little way off, was Minister Mwangi. He raised his arm and pointed, his finger a damning accusation, aimed directly at Wanjiru. In that split second, the world narrowed. Juma was no longer Nayoka, the cool, detached hacker. He was just a man in love with a woman who was about to be swallowed by the dark. He abandoned his post, his fortress of screens and code, and sprinted from his hidden sanctuary, launching himself into the pandemonium. He shoved past Kendi, ignored Omondi's panicked shout, and broke through the cordon of his own friends, yelling her name, a desperate, hopeless sound lost in the rising din of screams and sirens. He reached her just as a GSU officer, his face a mask of brutal intent, lunged with his baton. Juma didn't hesitate. He shoved her hard, sending her stumbling back into Omondi's arms. He took the full, crushing force of the blow that had been meant for her. The crack of the baton on bone was a sickeningly loud, intimate sound. He fell without a cry, and the tide of dark uniforms surged forward, swallowing him whole. Wanjiru screamed. It was not a word, but a raw, animal sound of pure, uncomprehending agony. Her world, her hope, her love, had just been extinguished before her eyes. Kendi and a stunned Omondi grabbed her, dragging her away from the maelstrom as the beautiful dream of a peaceful revolution dissolved into a brutal nightmare of violence and betrayal. They had lost. The march was shattered. The movement was broken. Juma was gone, taken into the very darkness he had fought so brilliantly to expose. Days later, in a borrowed room where the curtains were kept drawn, Wanjiru was a hollow shell of herself. Grief was a physical presence, a weight that made it hard to breathe. And then, a single notification pinged on her phone. An automated, heavily encrypted file, sent from a dead man's switch on Juma's server. The key to decrypt it was a phrase they had shared only once, on a rooftop overlooking the city, a secret whispered between them, a roaring lion kills no game. With trembling fingers, she typed it in. The file opened. It contained the complete dossier on Mwangi and the abductions, the digital bomb they had planned to detonate. But there was something else. A hidden folder, labeled simply Origins. It was Juma's personal research, a deep dive not just into Mwangi's crimes, but into the man himself. Minister David Mwangi had not always been a monster. Decades ago, he was a celebrated student activist at the University of Nairobi, a firebrand orator, a hero who fought a previous, equally brutal regime. He was the Wanjiru of his generation. The file contained scans of his old speeches, his passionate writings echoing the very same ideals Sotia Hockey now championed. And then, it contained the story of his fall. The system he fought had not broken him with threats or bribes, but with a terrible, impossible choice. They had captured his younger brother, a fellow activist. They had made Mwangi choose his brother's life, or his own. He chose his own survival, and in that act of self-preservation, he broke. He was recruited, turned, and began a slow, soul-crushing climb to power, becoming the very thing he once despised. The final document in the folder was the original, handwritten list of the disappeared from that era. And the first name on the list, a list he now managed and expanded, was his own brother's. It was a revelation that offered no comfort, no absolution, only a horrifying, sickening clarity. Her enemy was not a simple villain, he was a ghost of a future she could have faced. The fight was not just against a corrupt man, but against a monstrous system that creates them, that grinds down heroes until they become the tyrants they once fought. The tragic turn had come. Juma was gone. The hope of a swift, clean victory was ash. But a story told in Nairobi never truly ends. For we know that even after the fire has consumed the forest, a single, glowing ember, buried deep in the soil, can reignite the flame. Wanjiru had lost her love, but she had found a terrible, unshakable purpose. Sauti ya haki had been shattered. The voice of justice had been silenced. But now, as she stared at the screen, a new sound was rising from the embers. Not a shout, but a whisper. A whisper of a truth so complex and so damning it could unravel everything. A whisper that would spread from person to person, an infection of knowledge that could never be caught, never be silenced. The game had changed. And in the heart of Nairobi, the story was far from over. Will Wanjiru's new song be one of justice or one of pure retribution? What of Minister Mwangi, the fallen hero? Does knowing his secret make him a more dangerous adversary, or a target ripe for manipulation? They tried to cancel the hustler tax, the government tried to cancel her. Now, with nothing left to lose and a ghost to avenge, who will Wanjiru cancel next? Drop your theories and reactions in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story captivated you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Folktales Blockbuster, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story from the heart of the hustle. Stay safe out there.